Hey there everybody, and thanks for joining me again today for another amplifier review. I'm going to talk a little bit about the very popular new-ish Marshall Origin 20-watt head and speaker cabinet combo, the 212 combo. Now I picked this up off of Sweetwater. I think it was about, when I got it on sale, so I think I paid about $1,000. I think it's about $1,200 right now, and the price keeps going up. So if you're in the market to get one of these, get one soon if you like what I have to say about it and what all the other reviews that I'm sure you're watching have got to say. Now this is a pretty basic setup. It's a 20-watt head into a 212 cabinet. It's two EL34s and three ECC83s. The fact that it's 20 watts and it's two EL34s is a little unusual because if any of you know much about Marshall amplifiers, you know that the old 100-watt heads, you could cut it down to run 2 out of the 4 EL34s and it would get about 50 watts. And I can say that this is not the loudest 20-watt head that I have ever had here in my studio. For sure, I've had some other 20 and 25-watt heads that put out more volume than what this does. Now, I'm not saying that this thing is 100% quiet, but it's surprisingly less rude than a lot of things that you may come across in a similar wattage range. Now, there's some positives and negatives to this amplifier. For sure, it's got a really good clean tone, and I'm running it right now straight into SM57, straight into the interface, and no effects whatsoever. Now, I'm also recording all these guitar parts direct, using the direct output on the back of the amp, and I've noticed right away that I'm getting a lot more a higher noise floor, more ambient noise running out of that direct output. And if I A/B those, you can probably hear the difference. I actually haven't tested that coming out of my recording software yet, but I suspect that there's going to be a dramatic difference in the tone of those two things. All right, I had to adjust my levels there a little bit on the recording interface. So you can hear those back to back. If there's a difference, we'll be able to hear it once I get this all mixed down and edited in the video software. So anyway, back to the amp. It's got a bunch of controls on it that are pretty standard. Bass, middle, treble, presence, gain, and master volume. But it also has this tilt control on it. And I'll throw up a picture of the control panel the way I've got it set up. The tilt control, to me, I don't know, it seems a little gimmicky, to be honest with you. It seems, the literature, Marshall says it blends a bright and a normal channel sound together. It's another form of EQ, and you know, maybe it adds something to it, maybe it doesn't. It's just another something that seems a little bit like a presence control to me, but hey, I'm not a genius or the authority on any of this stuff, but it is another form of tuning the EQ to the way that you like it. Now it's got an effects loop and it's got a foot pedal or a foot switch, I'm sorry, that comes with it, a two button foot switch. You've got a boost on this amp. You can pull the volume or the gain knob, I'm sorry, and get a boost without the foot switch, or of course you can click the button and get that boost. Now for me, I play old school blues. I don't mess around with changing pedals or flipping switches or pushing buttons. In my show that I do every weekend, I pretty much get my amplifier set the way I want it to start with. I use one pedal generally on the front end of a Fender amplifier. I almost always play with a Les Paul these days, and I pretty much play with that tone the whole night long. Now I may adjust my volume knob a little bit depending on how rowdy the bar or the club is that I'm playing in as the night goes on, or if I'm maybe going into a specific part of a song to get a little bit more gain. But I don't generally switch my amp or my tone up at all throughout the night. So with this Marshall, I've got it set the way that I want it. I've tried several different things, experimenting with it, and like I said, here's that picture of my tone settings on this again. And I think it's, just to cut to the chase with this, it's a pretty dang good, respectable, rich, clean tone that this amplifier can get. Now, as you cut down the wattage, because it does have the full 20 watts, and I think it has a 3 watt is the middle setting, and then a 0.5 watt is the low setting that it has. And as you flip away from that high setting, it gets slightly less natural sounding. And I'll go ahead and flip it to the low setting. And it's got a little something going on there that it's, you know, it may sound a little bit attenuated. It sounds like you're running like a THD hot plate or something in front of it. Now, as I go back up to that mid power setting, that attenuation sound, that kind of sponginess of it goes away a little bit, but it's still there to some degree. It sounds better. And it's not super loud going from the low to the mid setting. There's not a huge jump. Now, if I go up to the high, I may have to adjust my interface here. You definitely get a better tone on that high setting, and it's not crazy loud. Now again, I don't have it necessarily set up to play really loud right now, but it's a pretty good tone on the middle and the high, the mid and the high power settings, I think. The low power setting, you know, it is what it is, and if you're in an apartment or late at night at home, then it's something that you can use to get by with, but it's not something that I would want to record with that setting. I wouldn't want to put that on a record that I'm going to be proud of. But again, it is for practice late at night, man. It's, you know, it's a viable option that a lot of amps have, and I think that's probably why they put it on here. So I'm going to go back actually to the mid setting. And one of the drawbacks to this amplifier really is the fact that the effects loop has a ton of noise. And I read that before I bought the amp. I knew what I was getting into. Like I said, I don't use effects that much, but this amp does not have onboard reverb, and I can't play without reverb. I can't get by with it. I feel like I'm out in the cold naked or something. So here is what happens when we switch the effects loop on. You can hear it there. Switch it off. Switch it back on. Now that is not my pedal causing that noise, because I have unplugged the pedal completely and just had a couple cables there, and it's present no matter what pedal is on there, whether the pedal's on or off. That's the onboard noise of the amp. Now it does have a sweet sound with this Fender Treverb reverb on there. It's a pretty good sound, but again, you got this noise that's just banging loud. And this brings up another point that I wanted to touch on that is a negative for this amplifier. Now, I actually like this amp, so don't take it as me hating on it. I think it's a cool amp, and for the money, I think it was a good deal, and it looks hella awesome. But as far as that goes, I don't think that this is an amplifier that is suitable to be gigged with. And the reason why is because the Tolex is pretty soft and it doesn't have any protection on the corners. It's just not built as ruggedly as some of your traditional Marshall stacks, speaker cabinets, heads, and even some of the combos have been built. It doesn't have any protection on it. I think it would get worn out pretty quick. And again, the EL34s, and I've heard that the circuit of this amplifier is relatively unreliable. I know that there's some amp techs, even on YouTube, that have professed that Marshall did some really stupid things, and that's not my quote, that's theirs, with the circuit of this amplifier. So I can't speak to its reliability. I've had it for probably 6 months now. I think it sounds good. I like playing it here in the house, but I wouldn't gig with it. And this brings kind of a catch-22. It's kind of noisy with this effects loop. Now, granted, most everybody that is recording, especially in a home studio, you're gonna put reverb on in the box after the fact. And so you really don't need to use the effects loop if you're getting some recording done. So, you know, you can kind of scratch that, but if you really just wanted to record a full band in one take without running any kind of after the fact effects in the box, it would be tough to get a quiet, clean sound out of this amplifier if you were running some pedals through the effects loop. So that's one of the drawbacks to it. But man, it's got a really good, clean tone. It really does have a nice, clean tone. And for sitting at home practicing and fooling around, it's really neat. Now, some of you folks that are new to the amplifier world or to guitar playing, if you haven't been around that long, you probably associate Marshall with a really high gain sound. And for most of their stuff from the 90s on up, it's been pretty high gain stuff. I used to have a JCM 800 and a 900, and man, those things could burn a house down for sure. But Marshall started making copies of the Fender Bassman, and the Fender Bassman has always been known as an amp with a little bit of gain available, but it was blisteringly loud, and that's kind of what the traditional Marshalls are. And funny enough, even, I guess not funny enough, because it's called the Origin, this amp kind of tonally mimics those earlier Marshall amps, where it's got a really good, crisp, brighter, clean tone, and that's kind of what it does well. Now, you can dial it in and get some gain without using a pedal in front of it, but it's not anything close to some of their other more modern multi-channel amplifiers. That's just the bottom line here. But I'm gonna throw the old Tube Screamer in front of it now, and I've got a bunch of other pedals that actually sound a little bit better than the Tube Screamer do. But I think everybody that's into guitars that has got any kind of pedals has got some kind of green Tube Screamer-ish overdrive pedal hanging around. So I'm just gonna use that one. I'm gonna throw it on the front end here, and we'll listen to what kind of tones you can get with that. So here's the Tube Screamer with a very modest amount of gain set up on the pedal. So that's a pretty good tone. Now, let me goose up the gain a little bit and we'll get into that more modern Marshall territory. And that is a pretty good, cool tone. A little bit of reverb coming from my Fender Treeverb pedal. Pretty good amount of gain coming off of that Tube Screamer. Now, personally, I think the Tube Screamer, at least for the most part, is designed to give you that Marshall-y sound, so it's a little bit scooped in the mid, kind of like the Marshall is naturally. And layering those two on top of each other really gives you maybe some overkill to some degree, and you can probably hear how it's a pretty bright tone, but it's very, very usable, and it's a really good sound. You can do a lot of things with that. Now I'm going to swap it up, put the Les Paul in front of it, and we'll hear how this thing sounds like that. All right, so here is the Epiphone 59 Les Paul Standard into the Tube Screamer into the Origin. Now I've got the Origin still on the mid power setting. And I'm no rock and roll player. I actually pretty much only play blues, so forgive me for my bad impersonation of heavier rock guitar. If I can put a little slide on this thing. You can get a pretty cool late 60s, early 70s Southern rock slide tone with this thing, and really get close to that, you know, Dwayne or Skinner or whatever you want to get to. All those guys were playing Marshalls of some sort. Clapton even, you can get a little bit of Blues Breakers type stuff with a pedal in front of this thing. It's pretty easy to do. So overall, I think it's a really cool amp. There's a limited amount of tones in there, but they're pretty good and pretty high quality. Again, to kind of recap, I wouldn't take this out gigging often because I don't think it would stand up to it physically, but I could be wrong. And at the same time as that, I've heard some negative things about the reliability of the circuit, but so far mine has been pretty cool. I play it pretty regular here at the house. I don't run it, you know, full blast on high power a whole lot, but you know, it's a cool tone. Now, also, I do have some upgraded speakers. If you've made it this far in this video, I'm gonna be honest with you. I've got two eminent speakers in this cabinet. I've got a Wizard and, oh man, I can't remember the other one. I've got a couple of British toned eminent speakers in this cabinet, and it didn't make a huge difference. It wasn't like a night and day, like, oh my God, it just opened a whole new world. It wasn't like in a Blues Junior, if you swap out the speaker, it makes all the difference. But it did improve the tone. So if you like what you're hearing here, maybe look into some upgraded 12s. But I thought it sounded pretty good just right out of the box. It was not a whole lot different than what it sounds like now. Maybe just slightly less rich. But I have swapped out a couple of the tubes and of the ECC 83s. I've got a massive collection of vintage tubes, but I didn't find anything that sounded remarkably better than what was in there, to be honest. And so I think I've got a vintage tube in position 1, but position 2 and 3 is the stock tubes that came with it, and I think they sound pretty good. So overall, the Marshall Origin, the 20 watt, I'm gonna say it's a solid thumbs up from me. It's a good price. It's a good value if you're not going to take it out. It's loud. It's plenty loud enough to play with most any drummer. And it could make a decent recording amp if you don't want to spend a ton of money on, you know, a higher quality Marshall, or if you want that EL34 sound, but you're not necessarily going to use it all the time. And that's really why I always keep a Marshall hanging around, is because I mostly play Fenders, but every once in a while I like to have the option of having that EL34 sound, particularly when I'm doing recordings. On all of my records, at some point I've had an EL34 amp on there, and an EL84 amp on there for that matter. But mostly what I do is 6V6 and 6L6 stuff, mainly vintage Fenders. But anyway, thanks for joining me today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Go out and pick one of these things up. It's pretty cool. You can get the head for about $650, I think. I think the combos are just a little bit more than that. So yeah, Marshall Origin 20 watt, cool amp, looks awesome. Sitting here in the studio, it's impressive. And it's a pretty decent value. And that's all I've got to say about it. So check out some of my music. You can find my records on iTunes and Spotify and all those places like that. I'm too old to figure out how those things work, but apparently you can go in there and buy my music, and I would love it if you did. So we'll see you guys again soon, and hopefully out in the real world.